Hi everyone, Sue, a compulsive overeater. I weigh and measure 3 meals a day from the gray sheet. I write it down, I call it into my sponsor. I don't eat in between no matter what. For today, abstinence is the most important thing in my life without exception. As I said earlier, May 18th, 2006 is my abstinence date, and I go to meetings and do service to build a defense against the first fight. Um, it's an honor and a privilege to be able to qualify. Those in Connecticut that know me, I start this every time I start talking about abstinence, and especially with this milestone that I have. When I first came in 2003, I played around with this and got abstinent in 2006, and I had said, "Oh, I'm only going to do it for 20 years, and I'm out." So that was very much on my mind the last year. I took a conscious decision to kind of pull back from service, and just get back to basics, get to meetings, write down my food, call it in on time, make outreach, and just keep it back to the basics, because that thought scared me. Because if I do go out, I ain't coming back. um, I'm a down and dirty sugar addict. I Halloween and Easter, my high holy days. um, and I looked pretty normal growing up, young, 5, 6, 8. It was that pre-puberty stage where, normal, typically kids kind of pudge out and grow. Well, I did that, but I didn't grow. I'm only 5 foot tall. And I just remember that awkward feeling, that less than feeling, feeling, on the outside looking in, low self-worth, low self-esteem, teased in elementary school and middle school. Not so much high school. I had gotten a handle on my weight when I got to high school. I watched my parents struggle with their weight. It was the days of, Weight Watchers I tried countless times, but I remember, watching General Hospital and seeing Richard Simmons and the Fat Serenity and, Susan Powder, those infomercials on late at night. I remember, I think it was Suzanne Summers who was on Three's Company, who had done some sort of interview, and she had, was saying like what she did to stay active and everything. And I was an 80s kid, aerobics, and all of that. And I'm grateful for that time, because I still have that feeling of just wanting to work out and be active. I know how important that is. And by the time I got to high school, I was living on about 800 calories a day, but the head was still crazy. Comparing myself to other girls, not in the right friend group. Only child, so very kind of hyper vigilant, very dependent, independent, a latchkey kid. And, just got it done, but also feeling awkward and, just having this underlying low self-esteem, low self-worth, because I think of all of the history, of being teased and, not having the right friends and all of that. And I used food to medicate. I used food to numb. And I didn't understand why, because I thought like there was something lacking in me. Sorry for the background noise. I'm in my car. I had dinner with my kids. So that's why I'm in my car. I'm parked safe. I couldn't figure out why I couldn't have one of something. Like I would watch people and people watch in malls, or people at work who could eat mounds of things and just go to town and still maintain a size 2. Keep, sugary stuff on their coffee tables and not eat it. Like that was a foreign concept to me, because as soon as I brought that stuff in the house or I would buy it, like it would be gone and I'd be replacing it. And once I got out of high school, the expectation that I grew up with was, you're supposed to meet a guy, and get married, have kids, stay home, and, stay home and raise your kids and get heavy and go on medicine and have, ailments for the rest of your life kind of thing. So, like the good girl that I was, I did meet a guy my senior year of high school. We dated for about 6 years and we got married, and it was an Italian Portuguese family. They showed love through food, and all bets were off. And he became my new eating buddy. Um, and every family event, every vacation, all revolved around the food. And that's how I connected with my then mother-in-law, comparing recipes and things at Christmas, the sugary stuff that you bake at Christmas, and kind of competing, and, the family parties, once I had the kids, um, you know, more was better. But I couldn't wait for people to leave my house so I can just sit in front of that table and graze. I couldn't wait for my kids to go to bed so I can dive into the pantry closet. The insanity of the disease, I have not forgotten that. And I have not forgotten my last binge. I know how much of an addict I am now. And I'm so grateful that I have that language to just describe my behavior. Um, because I was utterly defeated by the food when I came in 03. And I resigned myself to be a happy fat person. I had gotten pregnant with my oldest, who just turned 30 in April. She's here visiting from LA, and I don't know where that time went. But I, was eating for two. The then husband went and got, every sugary thing and all that. And I was probably gestational diabetic with her, and she was 10 pounds, 6 ounces when she was born. And then the guilt set in because I took 6 months maternity leave, but then I had to go back to work. And my mom took care of her for the first 2.5 years of her life until my mom got sick. But, just eating the feelings, because I was doing my daughter a disservice because I couldn't stay home full time with her, because that was what the expectation was of the generation that my parents grew up in. And so I ate my way through that. My mom got sick when my daughter was 2.5, and she wound up in the ICU from complications. She had diabetes that was not managed well. When she went in 98 in December, her sugar was 475. And she wound up dying of sepsis from complications from diabetes. The whole thing just overtook her. And she was only 54 years old. Um, to be 59 right now is my age, and to be able to say that I've lived longer than my mother um, is just such a gift, because I was well on my way to the same fate. I was
Do that
200.
7.5, honey.
Awesome, Tara. Thank you. I was 265-ish when I came in. I ate my way through my mother's death, couldn't get pregnant, wound up doing fertility, got on some medicine, and I know there's no mistakes. I really truly believe the universe set me up to be here, because the endocrinologist wound up, I was insulin resistant because of the weight. He put me on medicine and put me on a diet, a range of carbs, 3 meals, 2 snacks. I had to write it down, test my blood sugar after I got pregnant and did fertility. And the twins were born in April of 03, so that makes them 23, which I don't know where that went either. And I was 36 years old and couldn't get up off the floor with them. I just wanted to be able to teach my daughters how to cross their legs, and I couldn't do it. Like I said, the last number on the scale was 265. And I had just resigned to be a happy fat person, like that fat serenity thing, because I gave up. Like, okay, I said it out loud to the universe. And all that time, I married into a family with a GreySheeter. And it was my then father-in-law's sister, always heard at family events, she does crazy things with her food. And would always ask me, at family events, like, what's in the food. She invariably never ate the food I made, which I understand now why. And we would go to her house Memorial Day, July 4th, and it was July 4th of 03. And she had said that there was a meeting starting in Bethel, which was 10 minutes from my house at the time in Connecticut. And she's like, I'll meet you there. And by the grace of God, something in me said, yes, I'll go. And I walked into that meeting full of ego. Before we went in, she stopped me in the beginning, and she's like, just keep an open mind and know that we're all crazy. Lovingly said that. And I walked in with so much ego, I'm surprised my butt got in the door. Didn't understand concept of a grateful compulsive overeater. I had no 12-step experience coming in, full of ego. You had to have carbs. I knew it all. I just wanted to lose the weight. So I had spirited a copy away. I eventually did get a sponsor, and promptly lied to her for almost 3 years. Would call my food in, put the white stuff in my coffee, go to work, and practice all of those behaviors like I had never done Gray Sheet. Go to the Golden Arches, grab the stuff, eat it in the car, dribble on my shirt, throw it out to get the smell out of my car. And then in May 17th of 06, it was my last binge, and it was just this beautiful day of blue sky, sun. I go to the fast food restaurant again. I go to the drive-through. I remember the meal. I remember driving across to the other shopping center, driving around the back and eating like an animal. And it didn't even taste good. But just that feral ability just to scarf something down and not like, it was just animal like. And I drove out of that shopping center, threw out the bags again, and something inside of me, again, my higher power, like, either you can go back to eating this way and putting all, because I had lost some weight by doing this, or you can do Gray Sheet. And that's when I embraced Gray Sheet, and that was May 18th, 2006. And at that point, Gray Sheet became smaller, in the sense that when I came in, and those first 3 years, I made it bigger than it needed to be. I had to do it the rest of my life. I had to do it perfect. Learn the 12 steps, learn the way to measure your food, do this, this, and this. And the blessing of growing up in the Connecticut community was just, after I got honest, the message I heard was, just don't eat. No major changes the first year, and just learn the mechanics of weighing and measuring your food. Understanding what 4.0, 8.0, 12.0, understanding what 4.2 is, picking up the phone and making that call, to be humble enough and honest enough and to live with integrity to do that. That was humbling for me, because I knew it all, just that only child, defiant little bitch in me. But, I was brought to my knees with the food. I was humbled by the food. So when I got abstinent, it became, I just have for today. And that's what I carried with me. And my kids were little. The twins were 3. My oldest was 10, and it was being abstinent, raising kids, working a full-time job, a 45-minute commute one way, managing a house, trying to manage a marriage and a relationship, a career and all that. All 3 of my kids played soccer, so it was shepherding them, to practices and games and tournaments, and making sure that, I got to meetings, that I did a prayer and meditation practice in the car going down to work, because that's all I could muster. But making sure, like, I had abstinent food and weighed and measured. And, it was just the little broken shoelaces, the crap that went on at work, or, the kids fighting or whatever. And those were like the broken shoelaces were like the no matter what's, until about 2018. And then the universe was like, here, have a platter full. A boy that my daughter dated in high school had died suddenly after college. I knew the dad. They weren't dating anymore. But that was a shock. A month later, my dad was diagnosed with liver cancer. I took care of him for 6 months, navigating his care. He lived an hour and 45 minutes away from me. Thank God he lived around the corner from a grocery store. But managing his care, shepherding him to doctor's appointments, all the while managing a house, managing 3 kids, one in college, 2 of which didn't drive yet. So I had to give my then husband, here's the list, get them where they needed to be. And that's about all the help he gave me, physically and emotionally. Like, there was none of that there. And my dad passed in March of 2019. He timed it perfectly. Just after I finished dinner, I got the phone call. I had a GreySheeter come for support the day we buried him.
1 more minute, Sue.
Thanks, hon. And a month later, I got laid off from that job that I was at for 30 years. Blessed with a severance and another year, another 6 months of trying to find the job that I'm in now. I'll be there 6 years. I got hired during COVID, being abstinent during COVID, being abstinent through my divorce. COVID really pushed me over the edge with that decision. And then now just rebuilding my life. It'll be 5 years I'm divorced in June, next month. And like, all of that to say is, yes, Gray Sheet was a pain in the ass sometimes throughout all of that, but like at not one point did I feel like I wanted to pick up the food. I picked up the phone. I relied on this community to get me through all of that. Um, my recent, no matter what, some of you have heard, my son joined the Connecticut National Guard. He was at boot camp earlier this year. He left in January to get him in March. Had to pick him up in South Carolina. My car had other ideas, you know, from a transmission failure to my car to my son's car not starting to getting a flat tire, you know, all within the week of me trying to get down there. But all of that,
Honey.
like, I did not once have to think about the food because I had done a massive meal prep before I left. And I weighed and measured that day's meals and all that. And, you know, it's not if I'm going to stay abstinent, it's how I'm going to stay abstinent. I build my life around my abstinence and not the other way around. And the peace and the vanity is great, although I've got a bone to pick with menopause, but okay, that's fine.
Time, Sue.
I'll wrap up. There's not one morsel or amount of food that's going to make anything better or more happy. You know, the food isn't the answer today. And I've got peace in my head around the food. And that is just the ultimate gift. So thanks for listening. I'm on my phone. I'll try to put my phone number on the chat. And just incredibly blessed to be abstinent a day at a time. So with that, I pass. Thanks.